we don't want to just lecture you. We want this to be a kind of an opportunity for a dialogue and an exchange of ideas and worries and concerns. As I mentioned in my brief introduction, we've just been having a strategic planning session of the Toda Peace Institute. And I've never encountered such kind of collective depression among people who are normally very optimistic. And I think that all around the world at the moment, individuals are feeling just overwhelmed by everything that's happening. So feel free to share your feelings about what's happening. You don't need to ask questions. You can just say, you know, I'm worried, because I think if we share that, then we might be able to begin discerning ways in which we can work together to provide resistance in a more progressive direction. So, open for questions and comments. I think Nob is going to run around with microphones so that you can be recorded.
I'd like to ask Professor Dreyer about the declining of democracy index. Well, that democracy index started to decline sharply worldwide since 2009. And actually, I couldn't recall the specific events what happened or influenced that sharp declining in 2009. So were there any sort of specific events? And well, if there's a chance to rise up the democracy index rise up once again, so what sort of elements would you think need to rise once again?
It's a very good question. I don't know of any single event that happened around 2009 that caused that beginning decline. But that's, if you look at that graph, you'll see it was sort of steady for a while, and then it's sort of a gradual decline. And that's why we created that map with all these interactive factors of, you know, migration, there was the pandemic, there was growing inequality that Kevin spoke about. And I think if you looked at the VDEM, you'll find listings, analysis, and listings of factors. But I think it's a combination of so many different factors. But I also, one thing I've been thinking about recently is that in the US at least, I don't feel that people understand anymore the value of democracy. Like the sense that democracy isn't working, it's not meeting 21st century challenges. There's a lot of anxiety. I think we know historically that when there's a lot of fear and anxiety, that's when people look to sort of what I would call strongman leaders, who they think will solve all their problems, that it's really all the immigrants' fault or it's this group's fault. We're going to make America great again, you know, that kind of talk. And people want that kind of reassurance. So I think that's one thing. I was sharing with my colleagues, I saw a recent survey in the UK of young people, teenage through 20s, and more than half thought that the UK might be better off as a dictatorship. I was shocked. And so I think a lot of it is education. Like, young people need to understand what the value of democracy is. And of course, in the UK, these are people who've grown up in democracy, so they don't know what it would be like to actually live under a dictatorship, what they might lose.
Thank you. Stein, do you want to say something?
I just want to add that this statistic that you showed where the decline from 2009 is the inverse of the statistic of armed conflict. Because 2009 is also the turning point there, where we had a long period of less war in the world, where we thought that were about to overcome the problem of war.
Yeah.
Most optimistic peace researchers has changed, and now there is more armed conflict than ever.
Interesting.
Yeah. Other questions and comments? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Taka. We've got. Why don't you go first on militarism and NATO, and then Olivia on the universities.
I'm Norwegian. I live in Oslo, Norway, and Norway has long been a member of NATO. I discussed with my Swedish colleagues, and I noticed approximately what you said, that they were very unhappy about joining NATO, many people, at least people who were social democrats or on the left. But there was at the same time a massive feeling of a need for protection and a fear of Russia. I felt it myself. The streets have changed, the languages spoken on the streets have changed. We have a lot, you hear Ukrainian language from refugees all the time. I personally must say that I was also in favor of Sweden and Finland joining us in NATO. So we will have a Nordic community within NATO. And it's fortunately these are democratic nations still. The Gaza thing, I also from the perspective of Norwegian, I don't recognize really the silence, because there has been an enormous rage in the Norwegian population against the massacre on the Palestinians in Gaza, and constant demonstrations in the streets with many Palestinians participating, and also criticism of Hamas' violent action against Israel. So these are just from one corner of the world. It differs from country to country, I know.
Thank you, Olivia.
Yeah, I think you're right that one of the things that contributed to Kamala's loss was that she couldn't speak out on Gaza. But of course, she was still vice president. She was still supporting Biden while she was running. So she was constrained. But I can give you an example. One of my sons said to me, I'm not voting. There's no way I can vote for somebody who I feel is perpetrating genocide. And I don't think he voted, as far as I know. So I think that's a real issue. It was very contentious on university campuses. The U.S. has had such a problem with anti-Semitism, so it's very complicated. But I think for many Americans, they do see it as a genocide. So that's been complicated. But I think also I agree with you that there's a kind of silence on universities, and it's worrying. And right now, too, that Trump is threatening to cut off federal grants. Universities in the U.S. depend a lot for research on federal grants. If they're doing anything to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion, that just, and that has been written into any grant because it used to be required. Whether you were doing science or whether you were doing the arts, you were required for a federal grant to say in what way, what efforts were you making to be inclusive. But now, so universities are scared, and that's a dangerous sign. Too many newspapers have settled lawsuits out of court because Trump was suing for whatever they had said during the campaign. And rather than go to court, they settled. It was easier for them to pay. Our public radio, public TV is being threatened with funds being withdrawn. So these are all worrying signs. And I think one of the ways that autocracy gains is by that kind of silencing.
It's extremely worrying when universities, which are supposed to be the critic and conscience of society, decide that it's, for a whole variety of reasons, that it's prudent to remain silent, because silence ends up creating a permissive environment for Trump and his agenda. Any other comments and questions? Yes.
I think it's shockingly the time for women's rights has in America is it's shockingly difficult right now, and people that are from the LGBTQIA communities, I can just imagine the psychological impact that these laws are having on young people or people in not just in America but across the world. And with the U.S. aid being stopped, I mean, there are so many countries in the global south that are also suffering from the lack of this aid. So, especially women in conflict areas. So, from that gendered perspective, I'm just wondering what direction can civil society take to counter this what kind of support can we do on the grassroots level to support women and people from the LGBTQIA communities to feel like they have the right to live and the right to their identity, and even those that want to have children, that they will be protected somehow.
No, it's such an important question. And actually, the Episcopal priest also mentioned that in her words to Trump, which was brave of her. Because as you know, Trump is basically saying there are only two genders, male and female, and it's not okay to put other on any government document or anything like that. So that fear is really there. There's a very macho quality to it, of sort of Trump's administration and kind of coming in and, sort of tearing things down, and we're going to recreate. I think it's going to take us all time to sort of take some deep breaths, to sort of think about strategies, what's going to be effective. But absolutely, the impact of withdrawing U.S. aid around the world, as Lisa, you were saying the other day, it's basically the richest man in the world endangering the lives of the world's poorest. I mean, it's just shocking. It's really, really shocking. So I think we all are going to have to strategize.
We come from the US, New Zealand, and Norway, but many of you come from Japan or are in Japan. So if someone in the audience would want to tell a little bit about how it looks from Japanese side, it would be wonderful. For me, it looks like Trump is a kind of school shooter, comes in with an automatic gun and shoots at Panama, Greenland, Mexico, Canada, China, but not yet Japan. Japan is waiting for your Prime Minister to meet him. Please tell if you have stories to tell about Japanese attitude.
Thank you, Stein. Does anybody want to take up that challenge? I'm sorry, did you want to... Yeah, give us your perspective from Japan.
About the U.S.?
About how Trump is affecting Japan, what it will mean.
Nothing. I mean, nothing's going on right now in Japan, right? We're just waiting to see what Trump's America does to Japan. The thing is, I mean, for the Japanese political elites, businesses, etc., the United States is paramount. We have to remain friendly.
Yeah.
We're dependent on the United States, not only for investment and trade, but security. We're completely dependent, although we're trying to get out of it slowly, but we're dependent completely. After World War II, Japan just opted out of the international politics. Said that's a system of war. We don't want anything to do with it. And then we relied on the United States to keep the military bases in Japan. At first, not promising to protect Japan, but later they do. But Japanese military had nothing to do with defense of Japan. It was relying on the United States to defend Japan. That mentality and structure is still in place, and so that Japan can only hope that one can wiggle out of whatever terrible circumstance or situation or is thrown towards Japan from Washington. Now, I have now. Is that all right? Did that sort of?
Well, we can have other comments as well. I mean, is your Prime Minister going to capitulate if Trump says, we want you to double your defense expenditure?
Well, they'll nod and say we'll try. And the question is in the press in Japan, they're saying, is he even going to mention Nippon Steel? Yeah. Right? If the Prime Minister mentions that, will that offend Trump? Yeah. And in that case, perhaps just leave it aside. Just don't bring it up. Okay. It's that kind of mentality.
Your question then?
A question. It's about peace in East Asia, reassurance. Taiwan and South China Sea are the two issues that are constantly mentioned. But I don't think those are the issues. The issue is US-China rivalry. The US looks at China as a pure competitor now and is determined, I mean, absolutely determined to knock it down. Just like after 1945, the United States wanted and actually accomplished, really, to be the most powerful military in the world, stronger than the rest of the world combined. In that same kind of logic, it's going to beat China down. I think it's completely, I mean, determined to do that. I mean, last time the US identified a peer competitor in that sense was Japan in the 1980s. And then the US put a lot of pressure on Japan, Plaza Accords, et cetera, Japan just backed down, and the economy has been in ruins since. China is not going to back down. It's not. So, in that competition between US and China, what is the room, where is the room, or what is the reassurance that can be made?
I agree with you that the great game is between the US and China. And we are organizing a small workshop in the next few days to discuss exactly the question that you are asking. I agree with almost all you said, but I'm not so sure about Trump, because I don't see him as a strategist, and I don't know that he has these great designs to knock down China. There has been a strong intellectual tendency among hardliners in the United States, and many of his advisors that he has chosen are the people who really want to take China. And it could be done with economic means, but it must be backed up with military power. But that's not Trump's business. So we have not yet seen what he does with China, except that we have seen that he invited Xi Jinping to his inauguration. He has also only imposed 10% extra tariffs in addition to what was before, and he did it carefully at the same time as he declared 25% on Mexico and Canada. So there is some kind of game here. So I will look forward, no, not look forward to, but I'm anxiously looking forward to seeing what he will do with his East Asian allies. Will he put pressure on South Korea and Japan to arm more, or to double their defense budgets and to pay for American troops and so on, and then threaten with withdrawal? That would, of course, play into China's hands. In a way, because you have this Trump at the top, I think that China and Xi Jinping have their greatest chance ever in history to play a constructive role on the global scene and make friends with all those who are harmed by US policies. So Trump is playing into the hands of China if China is able to pick it up. But the Chinese political system is probably not able to pick it up, but might be tempted instead to use a vacuum power to push forward instead, so that you get a more expansionist China in a situation where the United States ends up in an internal chaos. Because Trump is not just attacking around the world, but he's attacking to great extent internally. Yes. So he's out there together with Elon Musk to destroy the federal state. So this may actually, I start thinking that this may be the end of U.S. Role as the greatest world power.
Other questions and comments?
Are we oversimplifying the current situation by framing it merely as a populism? And when we look at the distrust in mainstream media and the disconnect between expert analysis and public opinion, isn't there more structural issue at play? The key challenge we face isn't just about populist appeal. it's about fundamental disconnect between institutional frameworks and public reality, I suppose. And how can we address this structural gap without falling into the trap of easier dismissing public sentiment or simply appealing to it? So that's my question.
Thank you. Stein, do you want to have a go at that? And what about you?
I think I couldn't quite hear it all, but I think I understood, and you can tell me if I didn't. But what I understood is that you're saying there's some real structural issues at play. Certainly in the U.S., I couldn't agree with you more, that our democracy is not working well. And I think Trump's appeal was that those who have not been doing well in the economy, they believed his promises, even if his fiscal policies are only going to benefit the wealthy. But there's plenty that's very wrong structurally with the U.S., and that's been a long time growing. So I agree with you. It's not just about a populist leader. It was a populist leader who could appeal to very real grievances. And I do think in the U.S. and probably in other parts of the world as well, we have to address those structural issues, that democracy is not functioning well, that wealth gap is just growing everywhere. So those are real challenges. Did I understand? Did I respond to your question?
Yes, that's quite right.
Okay.
Stein, do you want to make a comment?
I can if you want. Yes. I agree that we should not think only about Trump, but also about longer-term trends. And there are several trends in addition to those that Olivia mentioned. One is what we have talked about, growing animosity between China and the United States. That has been a trend. Another trend is the growing role of social media vis-à-vis mainstream media, as you said. And this is part of explanation for the Trump phenomenon and can also explain many other phenomena. And then there is this role of digital technology, which is just growing and is becoming perhaps the key issue in the rivalry between China and the United States. And it's also in that sphere of digital technology that you have all the biggest fortunes and the rich oligarchs around Trump. And with somewhat similar situation in China, where the Communist Party rules over the oligarchs in China.
Okay, now if I could just make a very quick comment in response to your concern around populism. The MAGA movement, I think, was, in a way, a brilliant construction on the part of Trump and so forth. He played on people's grievances. He played on people's fears and anxieties. It was the politics of fear. The challenge I think he's going to face now is how to satisfy the grievances and fears that he aroused. And I think that's going to be a big challenge. We are actually exactly on 3:15, which is time for coffee and a break and a chance to chat with each other about these things. So thank you for a very productive first half of the afternoon.